Hello, U.S. history class. We're kind of switching gears, but we're in the exact same topic and area that we have been in, which is really the transformation of the United States and the idea of, a more modern America emerging. And so we're going to step away from looking at, we're kind of painting a big picture. So we're going to step away from immigration and urbanization in some ways, and we're going to look at migration and urbanization, but also the growth of kind of a new idea, which is not to be an abolitionist, to be against the institution of slavery, but instead to be an advocate for civil rights, which is, it's different. And so, it's like every unit that we're doing, in this setting, we have to edit just a little bit. And so, I don't want, this man who's pictured here to go away, though, because he doesn't go away. This is Frederick Douglass. I would hope that you are all, would recognize him. And he is going to be the first blanks that are in your notes. Frederick Douglass doesn't disappear at the end of the Civil War. He's going to continue, not only to be, Lincoln appoints him to be, this advisor on how to handle the issues of abolitionism and, the issues of ending slavery during the Civil War. He advocates for the black soldiers. He eventually is going to become the ambassador to Haiti under the Grant administration, but he's not gone. He continues to be one of the most important advocates for African-American civil rights immediately after the Civil War. So please don't think his contribution is over, even though we don't talk about him in this period with great depth. We are going to introduce some other early advocates for African-American civil rights. And so let's take a look and kind of set up this, let's call it 50, 60-year period that we're dealing with during the emergence of modern America, okay? So despite having won their liberty and their freedom and a promise of these civil rights with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which are generally called the Civil War Amendments, even though they are going to, happen during the period of Reconstruction for the most part, except, but they're a result of the outcome of the Civil War. Despite those things, Jim Crow laws that we have now learned about, these black codes, and American realities of racism and discrimination and white supremacy and hierarchy are going to actively restrict black freedom. All right. And so part of that story is the economic and labor system that is going to replace slavery in the South. Sharecropping, which is this, this new system that rises up in the place of plantation agriculture, makes tenant farmers, inevitably poor and ridden by debt. Now, was sharecropping exclusively a black experience in the South in this 50 to 75-year period? Absolutely not. But most Southern African Americans were tenant farmers, and tenant farmers are almost all incredibly poor through debt. They could not keep up with the system of sharecropping, and they would constantly just get a little more and a little more in debt, tying them to the land, tying them to their labor, becoming a type of what is often called wage slavery. All right. And so because of the poverty, the incredible poverty, this is going to further restrict these freedoms socially, economically, the ability to pursue education, better job training, improve your lifestyle. Things are pretty terrible in this system. All right. And so there are people in this era that will begin to challenge the restrictions on black freedom in a segregated South. Because, those redeemers at the end of the Civil War, all they wanted to do was put the former Confederates back in charge of Southern governments. And, by, the compromise of 1877, they really did. The military pulled out and they were able to build back up this system of white supremacy that locked the ballot box away from the black vote, but also locked black labor and poor white labor into this peonage, this system of sharecropping. All right. And so people are going to start fighting against this in a variety of ways. All right. So the first thing that we need to look at, and if you are sensitive to pictures, this might be one that you want to skip and I can help you with it, or, so forth and so on. But, the greatest and most violent tool that the white South has to fight against black participation in economics and in the voting booth was murder. And the style of murder that was used as a form of terrorism all over the South is called lynching. And it's in your side column under terms. Lynching is the public murder of people, and it's used to kill people, but it's also used as a form of terrorism to control all the people that are not killed. I show you these 4 pictures specifically because these aren't just pictures that appear in the historical timeline. These were sold as postcards in Southern stores. Okay. And you'll look at these pictures and you'll see people being publicly murdered, and folks have brought their children out to watch. The town is lining up as they are hanging a mother and a son off of a bridge. This is an execution in Texas that was done extrajudiciously. These are not cops. These are not judges. This is the public at large that seized a man that was being accused of a crime and sold tickets to his public execution. There is no trial. Now, look, we have no idea how many people were lynched in the South in these years. No idea. We know that somewhere between 15 and 20,000 people were definitely lynched. The last number I saw was 18,000 people. We know they were definitely murdered in public without trial or credible accusation of crime, okay, to control the black population that lived in the South. But we have no idea how many people may have been murdered in this manner. All right. This is Ida B. Wells. She was not just a person that crusaded against lynching. She is, and you have to appreciate the boldness and bravery of her in this position. She had an acquaintance of hers in Louisiana lynched, murdered, and she was shocked that this takes place. And Ida B. Wells, a Southern black female, was bold enough to go on speaking tours to point out the criminality of these murders, to rally people to fight for legislation, to end the institution of lynching. All right. And we have some fantastic quotes from her. Brave men do not gather by the thousands to torture and murder a single individual, gagged and bound where he cannot even defend himself. All right. And people would say you're insane as a black woman to go on this tour and to stand up against these people that are, violent thugs that want to, murder people for speaking up. And she says, it is better to die fighting against injustice than to live like a dog or a rat in a trap. She'd rather die fighting, okay, than to die trapped in this system. Ida B. Wells, an early crusader against lynching. This will obviously come up again. Please remember her name, okay? This gentleman is Homer Plessy, all right? Homer Plessy, Plessy. He is a shoemaker from Louisiana. He is 1/8 African American. And the thing about that, you might think 1/8 African American. Well, legally, he's black. The way that the laws were set up in this time period, and it sounds racist because it is racist. But, a drop of black blood will make you black. And we still see echoes of that in the United States today. How many people are listening to me talk that have, a white parent and a black parent? But generally people say, oh, you're black. And so we have echoes of that in our camp today. All right. What does Homer Plessy do? Well, he has this really, this ability to be legally considered black, but to look white. Okay. And so he sort of did a Rosa Parks way before Rosa Parks existed. All right. He intentionally is going to buy a train ticket to the whites only train, and he is going to get onto that whites only train car, and when the conductor comes by to take his ticket, he says, "Here's my ticket that I paid for. By the way, I'm black." All right. The conductor looks at him and says, "Well, if you're black, you got to get out of this car and get in the black train car." All right. And he refuses to do that. He says, "I'm not going to get out of this car." And so he is arrested. And he does this, he's promoted to do this, just like Rosa Parks was, so that they can challenge that segregation laws in public are going to violate his rights under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. All right. And if you want to spell that out, you're welcome to. That his rights are being violated, that he is not being equally treated as a citizen of the United States. It is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And the court case, which is in your notes, so I hope you're listening, the court case is called Plessy versus Ferguson. All right? Well, it's terrible, but, Homer Plessy loses this court case. Now, obviously, he is not being equally treated under the law. If the law, is going to state that, that he can't access public transportation. All right. The court gets around this by saying that if you have a facility that is separate but equal, that these facilities are legal. Now, the reality is this. We could look at this picture that I have here of water fountains that were separate and supposedly separate but equal. All right, you will see that here is the white water fountain, this big cold with ceramic top, and what is called the colored water fountain or the black water fountain here that this man is drinking out of. They are obviously not equal, but I am here to tell you that by separating people in general, you have made them unequal. You have said that in some way that people are not equal because they have to be separated, that in itself creates an inequality. But the court did not agree. Not yet, anyway. That will be overturned in the 1960s, okay? And so if we look at this ruling is going, to shape what the experience is of, both black and white people in the United States and in the South, because the concept of separate, the concept of separate but equal would apply to all public facilities and accommodation. All right. So when I say all public, this can be applied anywhere: public transportation, schools, colleges, universities, restaurants, restrooms, water fountains, parks, beaches. All of this applies. And so you start in the South getting this incredible separation of the races, even though in those years of Reconstruction, there had been a golden age of integration and participation. I mean, you see this everywhere. Go into a courthouse in a southern town or city. Sometimes you will find this really awkward that there will be 4 bathrooms on the bottom floor of the courthouse. And you're like, why are there 4 bathrooms? Two women's and 2 men's. Well, the fact was that courthouse was built before the 1960s. And it used to have a black male, black female, white female set of restrooms. You find that in public schools. Who has ever been over to Twin Lakes on the other side of Farmville? Do you know why there are Twin Lakes? One lake was for black people and one lake was for white. We had segregated lakes, okay? So, I mean, like, this was all over. And this probably to us feels bizarre and stupid and ancient and all those things. But I'm telling you, it's not ancient. All right. It's anything but ancient. 57 years ago. 57 years ago, this is the law of the land. All right. How many of you have a grandparent over 57 years? Well, they grew up in this situation with this incredible amount of segregation because it exists this way all across the South until the Civil Rights Act of 1964. All right. So, I mean, please think about what this entails for as far as opportunity, for Americans in these conditions. Okay. So facing this type of reality, lots of, African Americans in southern states give up. And I don't mean give up in a negative way. I just mean say, forget this. I'm not living in these conditions. Slavery is over, et cetera, et cetera. And we can do better. All right. And it will create something that is called the Great Migration. All right. From as early as the 1840s, but all the way up through the 1920s, many Southern African Americans are going to migrate to northern cities. And they migrate initially because they're seeking economic liberty. They want our ability to work and ability to succeed and take care of their family. You find a lot of people that lived in like Louisiana and Mississippi ended up in Chicago. You find a lot of people that are moving to Ohio from places like, Georgia and Alabama. You find a lot of people from Virginia that are moving into New York and into these cities. Hey, people migrate in straight lines. I know that seems really weird, but that's what they do. And so people are going up north and they're going, hey, we're going to get these opportunities up in these northern cities. But that might not necessarily be the case. All right. This time period is also going to coincide with the emergence of leisure activities. All right. And so what do I mean by leisure activities? That idea of going to the beach or going to vacation, going and watching baseball games or sporting contests, vaudeville shows, like musicals and theater, going to amusement parks, going to county fairs, all of these things that people work for that give you this idea that you're participating in this increasingly more successful economic world that is growing up in America after the Civil War. These public activities are going to also reveal the social separation of the races. Even though slavery is over, there's no integrated baseball teams. Whites could attend the county fair on one day and blacks could attend it on a different day or different hours. A lot of these minstrel shows, a lot of these vaudeville shows would have minstrel shows that went along with them where people would appear in blackface. If they are dancing shows, a lot of times they would exclude black audience members, saying that they wouldn't have, African American men looking at white women dancing. I mean, like, instead of being an escape, what the North reveals and these cities reveal, and even these jobs reveal, is a more subtle form of discrimination and racism that was an attempt to keep that veneer of white supremacy operating. Even in the North, blacks are going to meet with racism and discrimination. The North is not free of these things. And a lot of it is going to stem from the fact that immigrant population, that Italian population that had been a very exploitable labor base, white workers in general in urban cities, they look at these new black workers that are showing up in this great migration as an economic threat. You hear this echoed in the United States today when it comes to economic policy. That whole, they're taking our jobs, when you think about the influx of, immigrant labor that are coming to us from, Mexico and from South American states or South American countries, and that you still hear that type of economic fear and anxiety that comes from competition. And so this is a big debate that starts to take place in the black community. And the early people in the civil rights movement really are going to break into two camps about how, African Americans as American citizens are going to get past these challenges. So, what are the two schools of thought that emerge? The biggest contributor to the first school of thought is this man. His name is Booker T. Washington. He is a Southerner, and he was born into slavery. And he didn't believe that equality could come about any other way unless it comes about through economic success. In other words, once white people have to look at black people as their economic equals, they will then begin to accept them as their social equals. All right. And so he gets accused by a lot of people as something that's called an accommodationist. That you want to accommodate, white supremacy. You want to accommodate people who are willing to be racist. And he says, look, I just want to see, my black communities become successful. All right. And in the turn for that, he is the president of a place that is called the Tuskegee Institute. And that is spelled Tuskegee. That's an E. I know y'all say I have terrible E's. Institute. And the Tuskegee Institute trains African Americans for skilled jobs, not low skill stuff. I mean things like, the sciences, to be, mechanics, to be engineers, to work in, things today like, plumbing and, like a skilled job, to become pilots, all those things. A really famous example of this is going to be George Washington Carver. And a lot of y'all have heard about George Washington Carver, who was a scientist that discovered all these, uses for peanuts and that kind of stuff. But what he is concentrating on are things that are called vocational skills. All right, vocational skills. And you have vocational over there in your side column. So what is a vocational skill? It is something that is, and I'll give you a better pen color, that is related to a job. Something that is related to work. What can they take out of here? He wasn't trying to create a world of, of African Americans in this time period that are talking about, Virgil and the Aeneid or debating philosophy. He wanted people to have skills that would pay the bills, and that was Booker T. Washington. All right. The other person is named W.E.B. Du Bois. All right, not Du Bois, but Du Bois. All right. He greatly disagreed with Booker T. Washington. He is the first African American to receive a Harvard education. So he is a Harvard educated writer. And he demands instant equality in the United States. He says, look, truthfully, he says, these Europeans have nothing on me, nothing on us. We've just been held back. He said that what we need to do is we need to immediately take our constitutionally guaranteed rights, use them to the best of our abilities to create economic success, and that these best and brightest people in the black community, who are people that he calls the talented 10th, should then reach down into the black community and lift the rest of the community up out of poverty, give people jobs, give them hope, give them access to education. And so what makes W.E.B. Du Bois so extraordinary? Well, not only does he create one of these schools that is fighting to lead people in this early civil rights movement into a new equality, but I'm here to tell you that whether you heard of him or not, he is one of the greatest intellectuals that the United States of America has ever produced and is a hero of civil rights. All right. The idea in your side column of this 10%, just think about these folks as the best, the most skilled, the smartest African Americans that the United States can produce, and that in that community, you will find the launching pad towards equality for African Americans in the United States. Okay? So, what are our tangible records that we need to lock down about W.E.B. Du Bois? All right, just like Booker T. Washington founded the Tuskegee Institute, W.E.B. Du Bois is going to be a founding member of the NAACP, an organization that is designed to combat discrimination and fight for African American equality. And NAACP, even though we don't use the term colored anymore, it stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. We will see, lots of movement from the NAACP when we get up to the 1960s civil rights era. All right. He is also the author. I think he's one of the greatest intellectuals in the history of the United States. He's the author of a book called The Souls of Black Folks. This is a book that should be primary reading for students of U.S. history, but also for young Black Americans that want to access the Black experience during this time period in the United States. I highly suggest that this should make it onto your reading list. Okay, that is W.E.B. Du Bois. These are the folks that are operating in this early civil rights period. This is not the end of civil rights. I mean, obviously, you all know who Medgar Evers and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all of these other folks that are going to show up on the scene a little later in this story. But these are the people that will keep the fight alive in the years between the victories for equality that are obvious during the 13th Amendment, which gets rid of the institution of slavery, the 14th Amendment, which is intended to guarantee equality of citizenship rights for African Americans, and the 15th Amendment, which guarantees universal Black male suffrage that gives Black men the right to vote, and the incredible victories that are going to show up in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Okay? So my question to you for us to end is this. Did the civil rights movement of the 1960s fix everything? Was that actually the end of the conversation about civil rights? Probably more than any other group of students that I have ever taught, you know the answer to this question. We are in a renewed period of a fight for civil rights. And so when you learn about Emmett Till in 1955, part of this story is Tamir Rice in 2014. Part of the story of lynching and brutality and unequal treatment for people based off of race is the story of Breonna Taylor, is the story of George Floyd. The Black Lives Matter movement is a civil rights movement. And so you are living during the most recent civil rights era in U.S. history that saw tens of millions of Americans participate in civil rights protests in this, this past year. And so, listen to this, because it is the springboard for the world that you live in now. So we are not leaving civil rights. We are just establishing the next step in the fight for an America that guarantees equality to all men, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you very much for your attention. I will see you in our next class.